My name's Ben Harman, and I'm a curator of contemporary art for Glasgow Museums, and I curated the exhibition Living with War, Artists on War and Conflict, which is currently on display here at Gallery Modern Art. Living with War is an exhibition consisting entirely of work from our collection, including some recent acquisitions mixed in with objects that we've owned for a number of decades. It's looking at the way artists respond to war and conflict and covers a really broad geographical scope. Artists working in various different continents around the world. In looking at artists' responses to war and conflict, one of the things this exhibition does is put older works against recent examples of prints and paintings and works in various different media. This is a photo montage, a digital photo montage by Kennard Phillips, two artists who worked together in London, and it depicts Tony Blair and George Bush walking into Downing Street with an incident of torture, human rights abuse in the foreground. The images have been taken from the internet and collaged together to create a composition that's quite reminiscent of something like a Renaissance painting. This work was made a few years ago and given to us recently by the artists, and it's an example of a very recent response to incidents of conflict, corruption in relation to war, particularly the relationship between Britain and the USA. Next to the digital photo montage by Kennard Phillips is this painting by Christopher Nevinson, a painter well known for work from the early 20th century. It was commissioned by an official body whilst he was working as an official war artist during the Second World War. He had also worked in that role during the First World War and fought himself, becoming very disillusioned with the whole idea of war. It's called March of Civilization, and depressingly it depicts these mechanical-like human figures marching endlessly in a column towards a very uncertain future. Both the Nevinson painting and the Kennard Phillips photo montage offer up a very sceptical view of the role of politics in war and conflict around the world. Living with War includes two video rooms that contain separate works by Emily Jassir, who's based in Palestine, and Omer Fast, an Israeli artist who's based in Berlin. Each artist takes a different approach to video and film. Jassir, for example, has created an absorbing installation which gives you the sense and experience of the drudgery that normal people have to go through to undertake a simple journey such as going to and from work in a place where war and conflict is a common everyday occurrence. Omer Fast's film, which shows more of an interest in high production values, is about a German army soldier returning from a tour in Afghanistan. Fast's piece is more about the trauma of the experience of war and what that can do to a family unit or to close relationships. The content of Fast's film includes uncomfortable subject matter that not only conveys a sense of the trauma and breakdown in family relationship, but manages to make the viewer feel part of this discomfort, to have a direct understanding of what the subject is going through. The oldest work in the Living with War exhibition is this book of etchings by Goya, dating from the early 19th century. They are something of an ideological bookmark and starting point for the exhibition as a whole, but also many of the works that are included here. This book of etchings is historically important in terms of artists' depictions of war and conflict, specifically the horror of war, and the violence and inhumanity associated with it. This exhibition features work in a broad range of media, and of the topics relating to conflict and war around the world, one of the aspects that's drawn out is the issue of sectarianism. There are several works in this exhibition which look at sectarianism from the point of view of Scotland, but also Northern Ireland, although for obvious reasons it's a much broader international issue. This work by Graham Fagan is from a series called the Plant Series, where he's exploring the power of plants and their symbolic meaning. Sometimes ludicrous, he exemplifies how a flower such as an orange lily can provoke angry sentiment from people of a particular faith. Of the recent acquisitions in the exhibition, one of the highlights is a group of works by Walid Rodr. The central piece of these is a fictional museum model displayed to contain a retrospective of works by the Atlas Group, including framed prints and videos and film running in real time. Walid Rodr's work is all about exploring the lost visual material destroyed during the civil war years in Lebanon in the 1970s. The extraordinary thing about his work under the name the Atlas Group is that the Atlas Group and the Atlas Group archive were completely invented by him. He created fictional contributors and fictional work to raise awareness to the problem of lost attribution through things like visual records in places of war and conflict. This painting's by Stephen Campbell, and he's well known for work from the 1980s, figurative work that became really internationally renowned and put Glasgow and Glasgow School of Art on the map at that time. His work is perhaps not something you'd expect to see in an exhibition with a theme of war and conflict, but this particular image, titled Painting in Defense of Migrants, one thing this painting highlights is a human struggle and a sense of endurance in nature that continues despite the kind of war and conflicts that take place around the world. And this aspect is picked up in other works in the exhibition. We own a series of paintings by the British artist Conor Atkinson from a series called Newsstand Paintings that were created in the 1980s for an exhibition in Edinburgh. Of these, 5 are included in the exhibition. They exemplify Atkinson's particular kind of satirical work, for which he involves traditional techniques such as printmaking or painting with a contemporary twist. These works depict fictional newsstand headlines. They combine aspects of Scottish culture with issues that were contemporary to the time in which they were made, specifically highlighting social and political concerns. Atkinson poses the question, what cost war and conflict has when balanced against things like cultural heritage and tradition. The sort of 1960s to 1980s are a bit neglected now because of everything that happened at the art school in the 1990s, but when you look back a little bit beyond Douglas Gordon going to art school, you see where a lot of the influence kind of came from, not necessarily direct, but, so if you know that these were shown in Edinburgh in a really well publicised exhibition in the late 1980s, and you know that Douglas Gordon and Jonathan Monk and David Shrigley and Ross Sinclair were all young folk about to go to art school at that time, you know that they, at least some of them, will have seen this exhibition and probably been quite inspired by it. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that Jonathan Monk has made very similar work. Shrigley, to an extent, has as well. Ross Sinclair uses this kind of language of direct address. But not only that, Conrad at the time already had an international career. He was already showing in New York with people like Jenny Holzer and Barbara Kruger and Lawrence Weiner. And so they're not necessarily his most famous work. I think his most famous work is on Northern Ireland, but I'm pretty certain they're an influence. One of the recent acquisitions in this exhibition is an LED installation by Jenny Holzer. Made a few years ago, it's called Purple Blue Arno Erlauf for the texts written by her that it contains. All the words that are generated through this device, which we associate with public address systems in train stations or airports, refer to violence and human rights abuse. They read as if being the spoken voices of perpetrators, but also victims of conflict and war and violence around the world. Holzer's work is one of several works in the exhibition where artists use text to convey a message about war and conflict. This exhibition features work by artists from all around the world, including South Korea, where this artist Hong Song-dam is based. The works we own that we're exhibiting are from a series of woodcut prints where he's making work telling the story of people's struggle and militia uprising in his country in the 1980s. The works are installed on this wall in a series that shows the different stages of protest, propaganda, arrest, and death and secret burial. The exhibition includes a painting called Conflict by William McCants, who died in 1970 and was a Scottish artist who studied at Glasgow School of Art in the early 20th century. McCants was very influenced by modern movements at the time this work was made, such as Futurism and Vorticism, and the composition can be seen as something of a metaphor for conflict in its depiction of swirling, conflicting colours and patterns. Interestingly, he had just started at art school when the First World War began, and as a conscientious objector, he was sent to prison for his beliefs.